Oh, there's a new video from Teddy Bordesar. Let's take a look at watches, everyone.
So part of the magic around watch collecting is that when you select a piece, it is not going to necessarily work for everybody. It's catered to what you as a collector might enjoy.
Dressed up for me right now is jeans and hoodie.
As well as wearability. But that question of wearability
it is that way for a lot of
sometimes
people.
A little bit easier to navigate given that you have so many different watches.
Just picked up a new Lloyd Forger figure. Thought of you. Well, thank you, Bowden. I appreciate the thought.
Watches out there at a variety of different sizes. But the task today is to have a video where we look at watches that can fit pretty much any wrist size out there. In the past, we've looked at a premise like this, but it was a bit different considering that we were only looking at a single watch in a style that could look good on a variety of different wrists. In this video, what we're going to be doing instead is looking at watches that have different sizes within its specific model family that can overlap.
Oh, that is a lovely Tudor. Absolutely gorgeous dial. Look at the way it shines, that sort of sunburst sheen on it. I think I only have two suits, one being black and light grey, the other being similar to what you're wearing. Oh, I see. Well, no, that's a fairly good baseline to work off of.
I would say 90 to 99% of wrist sizes out there that want to at least think about it as being a consideration for their collection. So a few things to clear up at the beginning.
I'll try,
These have
gentlemen.
To be watches.
Never been a suit type myself, but I'm sure with your help I can wear something reasonable. Honestly, Resort, I have this feeling that that a gentleman such as yourself, if you were to go around wearing a suit, you'd probably look like a spy or something, like a real proper gentleman spy. Or at the very least, you'd, you know, give off sort of like Agent 47 vibes or something. And inside the blind bag I picked up, I got Thorn Princess, which in a way kind of reminds me of Jen. Hey, how serendipitous. Well, if suit doesn't work, there's always different styles too, but I'm sure suit works with you. You just need to find the style that you're comfortable with. Indeed, indeed. Yeah, you have to find what works for you and what you're most comfortable with.
That could be viable for the vast majority of wrists out there. Also, we're looking for watches that have at least 2 different case sizes that overlap with this wide variety of people. But if we have 3 different sizes, that'll make them a even more suitable candidate for a video like this. Also, I'm thinking about what are the sizes chosen by the brand. Say the Tissot PRX, 40 millimeters and 35 millimeters. I would argue there's a larger percentage. I wouldn't say it's a massive percentage, but there's a good percentage of people that might want something that splits.
Somehow mine usually makes me look like a barista. I wonder if that would be just maybe more of a choice of fabric and fit.
That's the difference. So a watch like that, even though they have 2 sizes that are pretty mass appealing, I would argue that that doesn't probably belong on a list like this. Also, these can't be watches of different model families. You can't combine the Tudor Black Bay 54, 58, and 41 as one singular family because they are different watches at the end of the day. Further, they have to be matching in appearance, so small little design differences with
I have 2 suits,
dial
actually.
marking.
Both don't fit anymore. One is a suit I got on my way out of the army. The other is my Class A uniform from the army. Ah. Sounds like a do for an appointment with the tailors. Possibly to get fitted for a new suit.
Or maybe the date window, maybe there's no date on another. I'm looking more for aesthetics. Do they look the same as things scale up? If there's dramatic differences, that will also not be eligible for this. And also, we are not going to include...
Not with 150 extra pounds, yeah. Time for a new suit.
micro brands, because that would make this a little bit of a longer video and opens up the field to way more considerations. So a video like this, I don't think it makes as much sense. And quite frankly, micro brands typically don't do this as much as major brands do when they're thinking about mass market viability. As you'll see with a lot of the watches here, that is what they're catering their watches towards. People that are looking for a watch that can basically check off a lot of different boxes and can be suitable for many different people out there. So
that's a good classic right there. Let's back that up for just a few seconds. The Rolex Explorer. They're super expensive. Even right now in these troubled economic times. Chrono 24, I've seen them, oh gosh. They're still $5,000 watches, even used. Much cheaper alternatives out there. But the designs and the aesthetics, absolutely a good choice to sort of take some inspiration from and find a budget choice.
basically check off a lot of different boxes and can be suitable for many different people out there. So to kick us off, we're going to look at...
Well, live people did compare me to Before Agent 47 because my quiet, serious personality back then. Strangely enough, some women found that a bit sexy. The suit got them even more interested. Hey, well, there you go. I was like, someone help me out here. It's a good problem to have. Fight them off with a stick, resort. On my way down to see if I can get Don's PC unborked. Oh dear, what happened to it? Must have missed this story. So you do look good in a suit then. Yes, I think it is now confirmed.
A watch from Seiko. Actually, two different watches from Seiko, but they are generally the same.
Good budget choice,
so you have the
Seiko.
SRPK family of...
Okay, yeah. This is, these are based off of an old diver's watch design that they've had since, gosh, probably since the 1960s or 1970s. And it's just, it has worked. It is a workhorse of the Seiko family. And, yeah, tough to go wrong with this one.
Of Seiko 5KXs and the SRPD. So if you remember when the initial relaunch of the Seiko 5 Sports was unveiled, it was brought forth with these SRPD models as being usually the poster child of what this whole new movement of Seiko 5 Sports watches were going to be. Those came forward with a Seiko SKX style case at 42.5 millimeters, but that brought on some conversation as well about, are these supposed to be replacements of the SKX? That brought some confusion, and I think these were given an unfair shake at the beginning. Once you got past that and realized what these watches were, versatile watches that can be worn in the everyday, they started to make a lot more sense for enthusiasts. So you have the...
Won't deny that, just humble myself, and like I said, not much of a suit man, but I can make exceptions for occasions, yeah.
One size with the SRPDs being at 42.5 millimeters, very wearable lug to lug though at 46 millimeters. I think this looks suitable for medium to smaller wrists, but also can look great on larger wrists. So that checks off that box.
Definitely something for all occasions.
There were some people though that wanted a smaller case option, like you saw with the SKX 013. How can we get...
Yeah, that's something that's we're seeing a lot of now. It started to creep up about a year or two ago, and now we're really starting to see it throughout most of the watch world, moving away from the larger watches, the 42 to 45 millimeters and above, and starting to move back in the direction of 35, 36 millimeter watches to something like no more than 39 millimeters for sizing on a watch. Those seem to be a kind of that Goldilocks size range for a lot of men, and for women, 36 and below. That's good unisex size in there. I have a Samsung Classic 6 watch with a 47 millimeter face, I think. Well, yeah, with a smartwatch, the bigger the watch face, the better usually.
Get that with this Seiko 5 case. And we saw that a few years later with the SRPK models. These come with a much different case, closer to 38 millimeters. The lug to lug is shortened, but it's only 44.2 millimeters in comparison to the 46 millimeters on those SRPD models. But with that diameter across the wrist being shrunk down with these SRPK models, as well as that lug-to-lug modification, these are going to overlap with a wide array of enthusiasts, and the design, for the most part across both of these, are going to remain relatively unchanged. Next up, we have a watch from Hamilton, two watches from Hamilton, I guess, considering we're talking about two different sizes, but these are two sizes that I also think work. Hamilton Murph, this is the khaki field Murph.
This is a very good all-around sort of one and done, go anywhere, do anything sort of watch that you can dress it up with a fancy black alligator strap like this, or you can put on swap it out for a bracelet, or put on something like a rugged NATO strap, or anything like that. It all just works. That's the thing I've always admired about Hamilton watches, is the design is incredibly versatile.
First released in 2019. This is a watch that was featured on the wrist in the movie Interstellar back in 2014. The watch that was initially unveiled to honor the film was in 2019, and it followed the same dimension set as the prop watch featured in the film. So that was 42 millimeters, pretty long on the lug to lug at 50.
Yeah, that started out in Interstellar as a prop watch. It was a one-off prototype that they made for Matthew McConaughey to wear. And And people loved it so much that people started clamoring for it from Hamilton. And so it was a few years before they finally came out with it, but they did. And now they've got an even smaller one that fits pretty much all wrist sizes. Well, I go back to writing some bad endings of my friends because no happy endings exist in the lore that I write. That sounds very depressing, Galaxy, not going to lie.
52 millimeters. So this was going to be best suited for people with larger wrists. And given that it is a field watch design without an external rotating bezel, it probably only added to that dial opening and making this watch appear a little bit larger than even the 42 millimeter diameter. Shortly after the release of this watch, we started to see the piling on of requests. Can we get a smaller Murph? That day came in late 2022 when
Hey, here we
Hamilton
go.
basically responded directly.
Yeah, that's smart. I mean, that's everything. You know, the rail along the dial, easily legible Arabic numerals, also counting for the minute hands. Very smart looking watch. I write horror and brutal stuff. What do you expect? Oh, all right. Well, fair point. Back to work. All right, Phalanx. Stay safe out there. No clue. Could write her, but chose not to.
To the enthusiast community with releasing a 38 millimeter version. The other thing that was notable about the 38 millimeter is they actually changed the proportions with the length of the case compared to the diameter. You'll notice the lug to lug on the 38 millimeter version is dramatically different compared to that of the 42 millimeter. They wear very differently, but I think if you look at these watches and the Venn diagram of overlap for all the wrist sizes out there, this is going to encircle a large percentage of people out there. And yes, I will note there is one difference between these watches with the second hand, but I hope you let that slide. I think these generally are the same. A brand that's always been
detail most people aren't
good
even going
about
to notice.
upholding this idea is Christopher Ward, and it is wild to see
Yes.
Christopher Ward has
Oh my gosh, I love this brand. I love this brand of watches. Designed in keeping with their logo, designed in England, and then manufactured in Switzerland. This is an older generation version of a watch that I actually own, the Sealander GMT. It's designed after, it takes a lot of inspiration from the Rolex GMT Explorer 2. And it, yeah, it's excellent GMT watch. Just really is just wonderful. I absolutely adore mine, Christopher Ward.
done in the last few years and changing their whole perception amongst the watch enthusiast crowd. They were started back in 2004. They're based in the UK. And
and this is their newest one called the 12. It is I think, sort of the latest logical step forward from the Gento designed Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. This is sort of, it had that design language continued on. This is what it would be and what it is really, because the designs were actually touched by people who trained under and apprenticed under Gento, or so I'm told anyway. But yes, they've got stainless steel varieties. They've also got titanium varieties. The titanium ones, I believe, are chronometer certified, so super accurate. Swiss movements, I believe they're ETA, no, not ETA, Sellita movements, off the shelf, and but absolutely fantastic watches, and such a beautiful design too. I mean, look at those; they're so lovely.
And have quickly scaled production and acquired a Swiss movement manufacturing arm. They've been busy with changing their outward perception with different model releases. I would say the Bel Canto was the tipping point.
Yes, who can forget the Bel Canto? This one, chat, is what's known as a minute repeater watch. So you see this little ring here along the edge of the dial, and then that right there is a hammer that strikes this ring and produces a chime. You can either press this button here to manually do it, or I believe the function is set up to where it will chime on the hour. So it is almost like having the function of a grandfather clock on your wrist, and just the complications involved in the intricacies of the movement itself is just, yeah, it is. These are quite rare. Normally, they cost a fortune. I know Creedor, which is like the absolute top shelf, tippy top tier of Seiko's brands. They had a minute repeater that was limited run. I think probably less than 50 pieces. I think maybe they only did like 25 of them. This was years back, almost 10 years ago. And it was an absolutely beautiful, beautiful watch. And the way it chimed, there was this almost zen-like simplicity and beauty to it all. And I think they wanted about anywhere between 20 to 50 grand for just one of those watches. Um, yeah, and then Christopher Ward comes along about a year ago and says, yeah, right, we can do that. We can do it for cheap too. Say 2 grand? Most people went for it, and they've been beloved for it ever since. I love the way that they do it. They're able to do a lot, and not charge a lot of money like a lot of other brands, watch brands do out there. Because they've been quite committed to their transparency of cost times 3. And that's why you're able to pick up a Christopher Ward watch for as little as sometimes £500 or £600, or as little as £1,000, or maybe $1,200 US, which is not inexpensive, but at that price point, you are getting a very nice, very smart watch. Watch and suit talking. Nice, nice. Hello, Rosso. Hello, hello.
To really change this image outwardly. But all along the way, they had watches that were steady, they were reliable, and they were pretty.
This right here, let me stop Teddy once more. This right here is what we call a moon phase watch. So as you see here, there's a little picture of the moon, and as the different moon phases shift throughout the month, it basically has a built-in lunar calendar where you can see, whether or not you've got a full moon or, a half moon phase or, a complete new moon. Yeah, that's also a very rare complication. Not seen in anything beyond, say, gosh, I'm trying to remember who all did moon phase watches. I think AP did some, and I think JLC. All of them incredibly expensive. And Christopher Ward just came along and did it for less. Just got done riding again, and it is quite warm. Yeah, it is. Some parts of the country got some relief with a bit of rain and some remnants left over from one of the hurricanes, but yeah, it's still quite toasty out there.
Pretty good value for money with their no-nonsense approach. One of those watches that you have to consider when talking about this idea is the Christopher Ward C60 Trident Pro 300.
Oh, classic. Looks pretty nice. Should find out where to get one. Actually, with Christopher Ward, you can order direct from their website, christopherward.com. They do not have any retailers or shops anywhere in the world. You have to buy online from them, and they will ship from England directly to your door. But yes, this is an absolute classic diver's watch. Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous, and the 5-digit intervals actually it really does set off the watch quite perfectly. I rather like this. And this is one of those color schemes of the black and white that you would normally find with an Omega, which, that's easily like a $5,000 watch, maybe more. With Christopher Ward, I believe they do it for about 600 quid.
100 is a bit of a mouthful, but this is one of these watches that is almost an archetype for this style within the dive watch category and fits the mold of what we're looking at for a video like this. You have a 38mm option, a 40mm option, and a 42mm option.
Go with the 38.
I would argue that these are the absolute sweet spots for pockets of enthusiasts for what they might be looking for for a dive watch. 38 millimeters measures out to 45 millimeter on the lug to lug. The 40 measures out to 47.45 on the lug to lug.
Oh, and all these colors
to
choose from.
Not too far out to that end, but even the largest wrists out there are going to find this wears well with that 49.3 millimeter lug to lug. This is just a check, check, and check. It's an answer for all the different pockets I could imagine somebody would fall for a dive watch, and this is a great example of doing this well and doing it at a price that is pretty reasonable, all things considered, for a Swiss-made watch. Moving along to our next brand here, and this is a recent development with this model. We have the Longines Conquest. You probably remember last year in 2023, Longines completely revamped the Conquest line. They updated it aesthetically, updated the bracelet.
Rather
the design
underrated
overall
brand,
was
if you
changed.
ask
the
me.
crown guard system was completely different compared to those 2010 iterations of the model family, and also upgraded the formula.
I never was a fan of the giant 12 and 6. I always thought that was a bit geddish looking. This is much better.
Those 2010 iterations of the model family, and also upgraded the formula from the mechanical side of things with the L888.5. At the time of the release of this collection in 2023, you had a 34 millimeter, which I will argue is going to be a different proposition altogether, given some of the stylistic changes there. But then you had a 41. So what was the number one request, it seemed like, when you were talking about this watch online? You would see comments, 38 to 39 millimeter. We need a size like that. And shortly thereafter, actually less than a year later, Longines released the 38 millimeter Conquest with this updated design format.
People asked, they listened.
These are more everyday style watches. So if I'm thinking about what is a great place to position two different sizes that can...
Well, this is another one of those designs that's sort of a good go anywhere, do anything type of watch. You know, you can dress this up, you can dress it down, swap out the different straps. Longines, I think, before a lot of other brands, was quite keen on having quick release bracelets and straps, which, you know, they're little tabs behind here. You flip the watch over and you can actually just sort of squeeze those tabs in, and hey presto, the bracelet comes loose, and you can swap out for like a leather strap or for a nylon strap or something like that. And yeah, it's really good all-round watch, just very well rounded.
Overlap with both smaller and larger wrists. I think 38 millimeters with the dimensions here on that diameter with a 46.7 millimeter lug to lug is a perfect pairing for someone with a smaller to medium sized wrist. And those that have a medium to larger size wrist are also not going to be neglected with the 41 millimeter option with that 49.1 millimeter lug to lug. I find, again, with more of these style of watches, everyday format,
not sure what I think about the brown dial,
though.
To
take up more of that bezel to dial ratio. So this watch wears slightly larger than the proposed diameter, I would say, if not true to size. But for an everyday style watch, I think these are in a sweet spot. And if you're going to pick two sizes, I think Longines picked two phenomenal ones to have this overlap with the vast majority of people out there. So another brand that I could mention here for having a lot to say about multiple case sizes would be Oris. Now, Oris is in a cycle of changing as of right now with some of their collections. You saw the update with the Aquas collection, so it's not as apparent what is going to happen with the different case sizes for that collection. At the initial release, they didn't unveil all of the different case sizes for the Aquas that we've seen in the past. So I didn't think that was the right Oris model to include here. Same with the Diver 65, because the Diver 65, yes, has a lot of different cases.
I love that retro aesthetic that they got going on with the 65. That just, yes. I love the just the classic tool watch vibe that you get from this. There's something both rugged and elegant and just absolutely timeless about this one. That's smart choice.
But you have the cotton candy at 38 millimeter, which is very different
that
than
one,
the
not so
36 millimeter
much.
Diver 65, which is different than the 40 millimeter Diver 65, which is a little bit different than the 42 millimeter Diver 65. So
honestly, it reminds me of my Seiko 62 Mas reinterpretation dive watch. This one's got like a 60 or 70 hour power reserve, and it's based very heavily off of their original divers that they came out with back in the 1960s, and it fits so many different types of looks. I can dress it up, I can dress it down. I have worn it with a suit, and it looks very smart. But it also has a certain level of ruggedness and tool watch vibe to it. It goes well with just about anything. So whenever I'm not in the mood to wear something a bit dressier like my Grand Seiko, yeah, the 62 Moss Prospects Diver, yeah, that's a good one. That's a real good one. And it looks very similar to this Oris here, though I didn't spend anywhere near as much as you would spend for an Oris. This is at least $1,000, maybe a couple of grand for one of these.
It wasn't as perfect, but there was one watch family from Oris that I thought fit a little bit more seamlessly here, and that was the Oris Big Crown Pointer Date family. You have a 36, a 38.
Oh, yeah. Very interesting design with the big crown. And they call it a pointer date because it's got this extra hand on it, and it points to the day of the month, and that tracks with this rail, with this rail track all around the edge of the dial. And of course they call it a big crown because it's got the big crown. You can just, sort of unscrew it. It's a little bit easier to work with.
And a 40 millimeter. This model family goes back to the 1930s and is one of my favorite complication types in this price segment. And Oris really owns it for this price range. The cathedral hands with the coin edge bezel with the romantic complication.
The hour hand is what gives it away that these are cathedral hands. And they call them that because it reminds you of sort of like the stained glass designs in a cathedral. Another thing to look out for with Rolex, for example, they got what's known as the Mercedes hand. So with the hour hand, it's got that little three-pointed star. It almost looks like the logo for a Mercedes-Benz.
Is something that you're not going to see many brands encroach on or even try to
love
any
that
degree
blue.
until you start to get up to a higher price
It's
range.
gorgeous.
And I love how this combines as this everyday but also dress appropriate watch. Looking at the dimensions across the board, the 36 millimeter has a 43 millimeter lug to lug. The Servo Volante is the representation for that 38 millimeter case with a 45.5 millimeter lug to lug. And the 40 is going to have a 48 millimeter lug to lug. You could argue on the larger of wrists out there, this might be cutting it a bit short, but I think that 40 millimeter could still work well on very large wrists. And given its styling to more romantic and classic vintage inspiration, I think you can have this one work on the smaller side of things and it won't look out of place even on those larger wrists. Now moving along, we have a brand that I don't think many people would consider. I am going to make an argument here because it's a really strange range of sizes. Some on the larger side of things might have an issue with it, but these are dress-oriented watches, and the silhouette of these designs are not normal compared to many other watches that we're going to look at, especially from that lug-to-lug side of things. The watches are the Nomos Tangente, the Orion, and the Ludwig. So this is the trio of dress watches coming from Nomos.
A German
brand.
brand.
Out of the 1990s and have been pillars of their design for years. The Tangente is going to have
very minimalist
linear markings as well as
taking a lot of inspiration from the
markings
Bauhaus school of design.
Ludwig is the Roman numeral dial, and the Orion is going to have all the applied linear markings across the dial.
This is a sort of watch that they would call a small seconds type because the second hand is actually in its own sub-dial down here.
All of them feature small seconds, and you have 3 different case sizes to choose from. You have a 33 millimeter option, I know, very small, a 35 millimeter option, which again, some might be saying very small, and then a 38 millimeter option. Now you might be thinking, this is crazy to include this on a list like this. What about the larger wrists among us? The weird thing about these watches though is how they wear across the board. The 33 millimeter has a 42.3 millimeter lug to lug, which is not insignificant. The 35 millimeter, which I own as an Orion, has a 45 millimeter lug to lug. That is very close to that 38 millimeter Servo Volante that we just mentioned from Oris. And then the 38 millimeter has a 48 millimeter lug to lug. So we're getting into Rolex Submariner territory. And when you say that a Rolex Submariner would work on the variety of wrists out there, I would argue it would. So I think this is getting into that range where within these sizes, very weird range.
I think most people would be inclined to agree with you.
33 millimeter case being part of this trio. I still think that this can work on many wrists out there. This is more of a hot take for this video, but if you ever tried on a Nomos, you might be able to back me up on this in the comments down below. If you don't want to back me up,
they
that's
are
fine,
lovely
so
watches.
Now we move into one that I don't think you can argue whatsoever. This is like an archetype for being perfect for the description of this video. We have the Tudor 1926. Now this is a watch that takes many classes.
Oh yes, the 1926. Teddy's actually been quite keen on this watch for a long time. And it's actually one of Tudor's lower priced watches, more of an entry level type of watch, but absolutely lovely. I mean, just beautiful. It just screams dress watch. And it's, yeah, it's, if you are looking for something that is sort of just right there at the entryway to the entire sort of House of Wilsdorf type brands of Tudor and Rolex, both of which are owned by the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation. This is it right here. This is a good one. I would say this one, and they've also got. It's not called the Prince anymore. I think it's the Tudor Royal. Or Royale, which has date complications and also day-date complications. Price point places them closer to this particular watch that we're looking at right here, which is in stark contrast to Rolex, which has the same sort of complications, sort of presidential day-date complication. That's one of the most expensive watches, but then over Tudor, it's one of their cheapest. So it's quite interesting the way things stand in contrast to each other. These days, given the shenanigans pulled by authorized dealers, where you have to get on a waiting list, and some of the more corrupt authorized dealers will flat out tell you, yes, you have to buy more merchandise before we will consider selling you a Rolex. And of course, now the rumors swirling that there's no inventory issue. It's just stockpiling on the part of ADs that they're just trying to get more money out of people. Yeah, I would say find out who those authorized dealers are. Just, you know what, skip Rolex entirely, just because of those silly little games that they're playing. I mean, I've always said, you know, who the hell do you think you are to ask me to beg you to sell me a watch? That's I don't think any self-respecting person would ever do such a thing, unless they are just that obsessed with keeping up with the Joneses and making themselves out to look better than everyone else, which you don't. You just look like a bloody fool if those are the sorts of hoops you had to jump through just to get a bloody Rolex. Honestly, I would say get a Tudor, or maybe even get a used Tudor for a lot less on the used market. You can go to some place like chrono24.com and find some lovely selection there, and don't have to even concern yourself with any sort of insane markup. Yeah, but no, this is a good choice here.
Classic traditional design elements and infuses it into a everyday package. You have different case sizes to choose from, dial options to choose from, but you have plenty to choose from when it comes to diameters from this entire package. You have a 28 millimeter option, a 36 millimeter option.
I mean, honestly, and a lot of watch aficionados and collectors are even starting to say the same things. Like, we're done with Rolex. If you want, basically, if you want the same level of craftsmanship, but you don't want to have to pay all the markups, and you're fine with either an off-the-shelf movement from Etta Solita, or, you know, something a bit different, go with the Tudor. Just go with the Tudor. You know, if you absolutely must have something that looks like a Rolex Submariner, and you want to get the absolute closest thing to that, a Tudor Black Bay, or a Black Bay 58, or even a Black Bay 54. And the Rolex GMT Master, just go with the Black Bay GMT.
Option, a 39 millimeter option, and a 41 millimeter option.
You can actually find Black Bay GMTs on Chrono 24 for as little as $3,000, maybe slightly less than that. And many of them have the original box and papers with them, probably still under the original manufacturer's warranty. And yeah, it's. I mean, why would you even bother at that point shelling out ungodly sums of money for a Rolex when Tudor will give you everything that you're looking for a lot less, and it's still from the same company and from the same family of brands as Rolex. Just makes sense.
This is probably as good as you're going to come across for being able to check off every single size that you could think of for every single wrist out there. The 1926 name is reference to Hans Wilsdorf when he registered the brand name Tudor. Again, classic designing here with the texturized surface for that dial. Multiple different dial colors to choose from. The one that I always typically reference is the opaline with the blue markers. 100 meters of water resistance and sits at the entry door for the brand just over $2,000, which I don't think enough people consider nowadays. You can get into a Tudor watch at retail pricing just around this $2,000 price range.
You can probably even find this on the used market for half that. So a Tudor for about maybe $1,000, $1,500. This is entirely a guess. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, that's the same price point as those Christopher Wards that we were looking at earlier. So yeah, top tip for you. Buy used from someone reputable. And yeah, fuck Rolex.
Then you take the next leap up and you get into the Black Bay family. So this was all recently updated in 2023.
Yeah, here we go.
Non-diver Tudor Black Bays, which probably...
Yeah, right here we have what is basically... This is the entry-level Black Bay. What is effectively an Explorer-style case or Datejust type case with a Jubilee band. All of those hallmarks that you would find on a Rolex, and you can find it here in a Tudor Black Bay. One of the entry-level ones for about maybe $2,000 or $3,000 if it's brand new.
Probably fall underneath the shadow.
And if you were to look around for an older, like a Tudor Submariner or a Tudor Prince, say on Chrono 24, one of the used marketplaces, you may be able to find versions that have a Rolex crown, Rolex band, and even a Rolex case back. The only thing different about them is it says Tudor on the dial. Because for a long time, Tudor was basically just rummaging through the parts bin at Rolex for their crowns, their cases, case backs. The original idea behind Tudor was, let's take all of the stuff that's easy to manufacture and real cheap, you know, your cases, your bands, your crowns, your case backs, but we're just going to put, we'll kind of do a bit of a rummaging about and mix and match on the dials, but we'll just put in like an off-the-shelf movement from Etta Solita in the back. You're not going to get a Rolex movement. But everything else was just rummaging through the parts bin at Rolex. Most people aren't going to care what sort of movements on the inside. They want the aesthetics. They want the look and feel. You're getting all of that with a Tudor Black Bay.
Of the diving Black Bay models, but these are as versatile as you're going to come across and fit the mold of the video here today. You have a 31mm option, a 36mm option, a 39mm option, and a 41mm option. I forgot to mention with the Tudor 1926, as well as with these, you are seeing some differences in the calibers chosen as well as the power reserve depending on the size, but from 36mm to 41mm, this is where you get into the MT5400. We first saw the two-tone versions of these models get
Oh,
the
that's
MT
pretty.
caliber treatment. So these are the manufacturer caliber movements from Tudor. And then in 2023, we saw the stainless steel options get these as well. What came with the movement upgrade when these were unveiled last year was also going to be a different dial pattern, or finish, I should say. You also had a different crown design. You remember more of that fine tube structure with the housing of that crown stem. In this case, you have more of the faceting on the crown. So it looked a little bit more elevated in my opinion. So now we go from having multiple different options to having just two. But again, I think you could make the argument that the two sizes chosen for this next watch is going to have an ability to be worn on a wide variety of wrists out there. So we have the Omega Aquaterra. Let me call attention to what I'm talking about, because there are different Aquaterra models. You have the Aquaterra World Timer, which is its own thing. That's a larger case. Then you have the other version of the Aquaterra family outside of what we're going to be talking about here with the Shades editions. Those were released in 2022, and those have 38mm cases, but they also have a different design style. We're trying to keep the same.
Omega, as of late, in recent years, well, ever since around 1995, have been the official watch for James Bond. So both the Pierce Brosnan and Daniel Craig era of James Bond films, they've all worn Omega Seamasters. They started out with the Omega Seamaster 300, and then went over to the Planet Ocean, and last couple of films they've had different variants. I think they, at one point, Bond did wear an Aquaterra. Not sure about that.
Same design style across the two different sizes, and for that, we look at the teakwood style dial versions of the Aquaterras. So this had this line horizontal.
Bro, I saw ice in the thumbnail. Huh?
Pattern that you'll see with
Victor, what are you talking about?
more contemporary versions of the Aquaterra. Within the 38 to the 41, very similar in their styling. The only thing that is different about these watches is going to be the movement on the inside. That's the most notable difference. So the 38mm are going to have the 8800 caliber, and the 41 are going to have the 8900 caliber. With those two movements, I think functionally the two things that you'll call out, one barrel versus two barrels on the 8900 movement. You'll also have the 8900.
Ice is slang for watches. Oh, I thought that was slang for diamonds.
Movement. When you pull the crown to the second position, you'll be able to change the hour hand in an isolated position, and further.
That is clever. Being able to adjust the hour hand independently. Most of the time, you only see that on GMT complications for watches, but Omega has insisted on having it for just something standard like the Aquaterra.
You have a slight extension on the power reserve, but this is mostly for performance and ensuring that there is a stable flow of energy down the gear train rather than extending a power reserve. So it's 60 hours versus 55 hours still. As I mentioned, though, I think these are two sizes that are going to...
60, though, that's not bad. This is the sort of watch that you can take off on maybe a Friday night and by Sunday night at least it'll still be ticking away.
Overlap with a wide variety of wrists. Now, the 38mm is slightly a small watch. It's going to wear well, smaller to medium wrists, 38mm diameter and 45mm for the lug-to-lug. You are seeing slight differences in the thickness, around 1 millimeter in thickness. For
Go with the
38
38 shot.
Thinner compared
Trust
to
me on
that
this.
of the 41mm option that's going to extend up to 13.2 millimeters and a lug-to-lug of 47.9 millimeters, right around that 48.
41 is for
cutoff.
bodybuilders.
I find the Aquaterras wear a little bit larger than their proposed diameter, but not by much. We're seeing that everyday style again, dial opening, maybe creating a bit more
Omegas, they
presence
tend to be
across the
chunky
board.
boys.
But these watches, along with the next watch that we're going to talk about, I think epitomize versatility in the luxury segment. And speaking of epitomizing watches in the luxury segment when it comes to the concept of versatility, we have the Rolex Oyster Perpetual.
Yeah, of course. The Oyster Perpetual, fairly standard garden variety type Rolex, but I mean, just look at it. It's what most watches of this sort of design are based off of. It's just, it's a Rolex, man. What more can you say?
Perpetual is going to have a wide array of different cases that you can choose from. You have a 28, you have a 31, a 34, a 36, and a 41. Now, there are
the 28 used to be known as the Lady Oyster. If it had the date complication on it, they would call them the Lady Date just. Because, I mean, it's so small, it's more fitting for a woman. Safe to say, you buy your bird a Rolex, you've made a very generous deposit into the love bank. 31. Yeah, gosh, that's still an awfully tiny watch. 34 to 36 is almost like a unisex sizing.
some differences with the movement on the inside of those different models. So the 34, the 31, and the 28 are going to have a different caliber compared to the 36 and the 41 millimeter options. But across the board, you have the general style and proportions that'll just be scaled up as you extend up in size. You have one of the most ubiquitous design languages that informs basically every other Rolex case since its genesis in 1926. It's an archetype, and it's no coincidence that Rolex, you looked at Tudor, what we talked about earlier, and then Rolex again. These guys are masters when it comes to identifying what are the desires for mass market appeal and giving people exactly that. This is a science for them, and there's no surprise to me that they have been able to carve out this lane where they have an answer for every single preference that someone might have for a case size. Dial colors to choose from are all there. Versatility is the name of the game of the Rolex Oyster Perpetual, and it is one of the pillars of it in the luxury segment. Now, this next watch is going to have two different case sizes from Rolex. I wanted to include it because I thought it made the most sense and gave the highest ability to make everyone happy if you're looking in the direction of it. But further, there's this fun backstory where Rolex was trying to figure out what is the right case size for this model family. There's been this back and forth game over the last 15 years with the Rolex Explorer, and what is the
fun bit of trivia chat. If you've ever read the James Bond novels, we're not talking about the movies, we're talking about the novels, the Explorer is actually what Bond wears in the books, which is quite telling because that's what Ian Fleming wore, was a Rolex Explorer. It's just a very simple, no-nonsense type of field watch, and it's, yeah, I mean, it's one of the gold standards. The original design, the vintage design, is still absolutely iconic. Not original to Rolex, interestingly enough. They had Tudors that did the same thing. And there was also a company called Nevada Grenchen, that made a sort of Explorer type watch around the same time, even had the Mercedes handset for it. Now, they have made some modifications for the modern Nevada Grenchen, the Super Antarctic, but yeah, there's a way that you can get into a Rolex Explorer type watch for a lot less. I think they're only asking for $1,000. Rolex Explorer, even on the used market, about $5,000. It's obscene. Tudor Ranger somewhere in the middle of that price point, and I think Long Island Watches has an Islander version in a variety of colors too. Looks very much like a Rolex Explorer, but I think they use a Seiko automatic movement, and theirs is only about 200, 250, which is really, it's not bad at all.
The right case size. The 214-270 was released in 2010, and it was released at 39 millimeters. This time was the first time that Rolex ever did this with an Explorer case. But then after a decade run, they said goodbye to the 39 millimeter and brought back the long-standing 36 millimeter case with the 124-270. That was in 2021. Then in 2023, Rolex did something that they had yet to do in the history of the Explorer family, creating a 40 millimeter while simultaneously having a 36 millimeter available. This funny back and forth is maybe silly, but it also is probably very calculated by Rolex. They have a robust market research team, and they're always identifying what are the asks from collectors out there and buyers of their products. They're doing this with great intention and with a meticulous eye. So now you have the best of both worlds. You have a 36 millimeter Rolex Explorer with a 43 millimeter lug to lug. This is the classic design.
If you're in market research, wouldn't you love to have Rolex on your resume? I mean, they really know their market. And working for a company like Rolex, yeah, you'll pick up some interesting things for sure.
Many purists are going to love the dimensions of this piece, but then you also now have a 40 millimeter, which is going to wear a little bit larger than the 39, but very similar to those that love the way that 214-270 wore with that 48 millimeter lug to lug. The fact that Rolex now has two different sizes for the Explorer makes me think that for a watch that is the foundation for many
Go
of
with
the
a
other
36,
designs,
chat.
have two different case options available. That was done with intention.
If you're going for a Rolex, which again, in this present climate, I would not recommend anyone getting a Rolex, just because, again, the shenanigans pulled by the authorized dealers, the just absolute ungodly driving up of prices in the secondary markets. I don't care that it's a Rolex. It's too bloody expensive, and there's too many people doing too many dodgy things in the name of Rolex, in Rolex's name. It honestly, it sort of sours the brand for me, and just, it really makes them look bad in my eyes. And they've got to get a lot more aggressive about making corrections and making restitution to the public before I would consider buying an actual Rolex. Someone wants to give one to me, I'm not going to turn them down, but I'm not going to go out and spend my hard-earned money on a Rolex just based off of all of that. I'll buy a Tudor before I ever consider buying a Rolex.
And I think it was done with this idea in mind. How can we make this appealing to the most risks out there and cover all of our bases? And for the final watch on this list, it's a watch that you probably would not consider as being a great choice for a wide variety of risks because it's so often associated with the larger wristed individuals out there. That's the Breitling Navitimer. You think about why this watch was designed. This affiliation
that is a big
with
boy.
Pilots, the affiliation with the U.S. Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, the history of Breitling in creating aviation instruments back in the 1930s.
It's a cool-looking watch, but it is a bit busy, if we're being honest. There's a lot going on that dial, and I'm sure it all serves a purpose, but yeah, it's a bit busy, a bit too busy. There's chronometer type watches that and Navitimer like watches that you can get all the basic functionality without it looking too busy, and for a lot less. In fact, Seiko has one that's been nicknamed the Saytona, and it's a panda dial watch, very similar to what we see here. Quartz, actually a solar quartz movement, so the subdials are solar panels that absorb light and charge up the watch, and it's super accurate, and I've seen it on Sakura watches for about 500, maybe less. Really not bad for a high quality watch. I think I'd rather have the Seiko Speed Timer, yeah. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon so you never miss an update. If you have any thoughts, questions, or ideas for future videos, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. You can also follow me on Twitter @LordRexworth for more updates and behind-the-scenes content. And if you want to support the channel, check out my Ko-fi or Throne pages. Links are in the description. Finally, be sure to visit LordRexworth.com and follow me across all platforms. That's LordRexworth.com. Until next time, I wish you all the best, and God bless.